You're in the Business Insurance Zone with me, Steve Savant, national insurance columnist and financial color commentator. This week on The Biz, our end-of-the-year tax planning for 2012. And on today's show, the Fiscal Cliff, with special guest Ken Davis, CLU, ChFC, CFP, and CPA.
When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Well, welcome everyone to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm your host, Steve Savant, and we're broadcasting live to a nationwide audience of financial advisors right here in Fountain Hills, Arizona, home of America's largest fountain. And with me today and all this week to talk about end-of-the-year planning for 2012, Ken Davis, CLU, ChFC, CFP, and CPA, and by the way, a little side note, national financial columnist.
Hey, Stephen. Good
to
see you.
Welcome back. And you know,
Thanks.
We're talking to Ken. Why do we talk to Ken? Well, not only is he a CFP, but he's a CPA. And nobody reads this stuff like you do. And I know that you're like, there's so much to read about the fiscal cliff and everything. We're just going to hit the highlights. We can't even get to the weeds on this because we don't have the time. But when we release this, we're pretty certain by the time this show's come out, we still don't have a deal, right? And we're hoping to have some kind of a deal. Ken, let's talk about it for a second. I've noticed there's two schools of thought right now. You have the one people where it said this is imminent economic Armageddon. On the other side, you have the Oracle of Omaha, you know, Warren Buffett, who seems to be saying no big deal. It's just imaginary. So what do you think? I mean, there's two schools of thought here. One, it's much to do about nothing. The other one is this is Armageddon. We're going over the fiscal cliff.
Well, yeah, there's two aspects to the fiscal cliff. One is the budget itself and then the tax laws. And the tax laws are all sunsetting that Bush put into place to stimulate the economy. And so the concern is that what stimulates it when it goes into effect deflates it when it comes off, and then of course the sequestering of the budget and that type of thing, just this flat reduction across the board without any real thought going into it. So those are the concerns, is that it's going to impact policy and it's going to impact pocketbooks. And quite frankly, Steve, I think the taxpayers are pretty fed up with a system that you have to find out what the rules are right till the very last minute. And sometimes it's getting, not only do they not do it in the last minute, but they go into the next year and then go back retroactive. For instance, alternative minimum tax. We've been playing this game of chicken every single year that these exemptions are going to drop, and we still don't know whether they're going to drop this year or not. There could be thousands and thousands of middle-class people that are suddenly thrown into alternative minimum tax are going to wake up and say, what? So, yeah, this uncertainty is really what's the problem.
Well, when I think about the budget cuts, the tax brackets going up, and remember, we haven't even talked about the debt ceiling. You know, we're supposed to be capped. How are they going to treat that? And some people want to separate that out of the pack right now and deal with that as a standalone issue. But think about it again. We cannot find common ground, and this is why maybe we have a job, because what we're doing now is we're trying to organize plans that go both sides of the fence. We go over the cliff, here's this tactic.
Right.
Oh, no, we were saved, or in my view, I think it's going to be kicked down the road, some deferral idea. So we're really not going to really confront the issues. But we're talking about some things that you can do this week, all this week, that can actually be very artful from a planning point of view.
Well, the beauty of it is in our industry, and our audience obviously, sells life insurance and annuities, and tax deferral really is king right now. I mean, how many things do you really get a tax deduction anymore? Well, basically, your qualified plans, IRAs, stuff like that, okay? And then also there's Roth IRAs, and if we think about it, life insurance becomes very similar to, tax rule-wise, a Roth type concept. Of course, there's cost of insurance thrown in, and we have to manage those costs to reduce the impact, but ultimately annuities and life insurance can be used in a tax deferral basis as an alternative. And whether these rules go in or not, they just become more attractive if they do go into force, and they're still attractive if they don't go into force. And I think wealthier people, whether this goes off the cliff or not, have to be forewarned that they have to do some planning now, because no matter what's done now, something will be happening to them, either directly or indirectly.
And we're going to talk about some of the solutions all this week. In fact, we're going to focus on life and annuities as a solution on our Friday show, and you won't want to miss that. Now, when we're trying to set the stage, there's a lot of politics going on right now, and of course, Ken and I are trying to be down the middle arbiters, trying to be some reasonable, we're conservative when it comes to fiscal issues, and we just want to be able to do like most Americans have to do, get their house in order. But you know what, Ken? The fiscal cliff only affects half the country because half the country pays federal income tax.
Well, that's true. And what's interesting is the fiscal cliff, right now we have a 10 and 15% tax bracket. Both of those get lumped into a 15% bracket. For those lowest earning that happen to just kind of bump into the taxes, that's a 50% increase in their tax rates. I mean, this impacts even some of the people lower on the totem pole. You know, Steve, one of the things I wanted to talk about with this whole, the way Congress has been acting, is I always wondered when they first put in these sunset laws, I mean, why would they do this? I mean, it was a Republican Congress and a Republican president back then, or maybe it was a Democrats, I can't remember exactly, but why did they sunset the laws? And I started to wake up to the fact that this is more gamesmanship. It has to do with budget and projections. If you have a tax law that sunsets, then the years after that you don't have to show a larger deficit, right? So it's a game. So they figure, well, heck, we'll make ourselves look better, we'll put the sunset rules in, and then we can deal with it later on. And I think those that wanted to increase taxes are saying, hey, this is great, because they're going to have a fight on their hands, and we'll have another chance at coming back and hitting the rich, so-called rich, you know, 250,000 AGI.
And when you think about it, everything, it's he who frames the argument wins. I mean, honestly. And when you define what's fair, what's rich, where's the demarcation line on all this, one thing's for certain, though, when we look at this and we're kind of like we're staring over the abyss, and I never know till you get to the pressure. I mean, we could be post-Christmas. We could. We could be post-Christmas, right before New Year's Eve, cutting a final hour deal. I mean, the witching hour. Talk about witching hour. I mean, we're talking about seconds before midnight. I think that's what we're going to see. I don't think anybody's going to pull this off before Christmas.
Well, and it may even go into next year, and oh my gosh, then we're really sitting on hot seat.
Well, when we come back, we're going to continue our discussions on the fiscal cliff. And remember, you can join IULUniversity.com for the best training, education, and sales support when it comes to life insurance and retirement income.
You're listening to the insurance industry's #1 resource for products, planning ideas, carrier information, and interviews you can use. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on a risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm Steve Savant with Ken Davis. And remember, you can order today's giveaways at thebiz at brokersalliance.com. And we're giving away the 2012 End of the Year Planning Guide. And I think you should get this and say, hey, don't read it unless you're, I mean, this is in the weeds. I mean, if you want a deep look at this, is great. But again, I don't know if we're going to really need this by the end of the month, but just in case you want it, you can have it. And before moving forward with any of the ideas that we talk about on this show today, especially today, always consult your tax advisor and your broker dealer compliance department before moving forward. Well, Ken, we're talking about issues, and we've talked about this before on our show because, you know, we deal with so many tax advantage products. When I'm looking at tax advantage products and all the artful ways of planning and using them in strategic planning, I have to sit there and try to define, talk about framing the argument, like I said in the first, you have to frame what is AGI and then what is modified AGI. I mean, those are two different definitions. Why don't you walk us through, as only a CPA can, through these two definitions?
Well, it's easiest for me, and I think for people that are familiar with their tax returns, to think about page 1 and page 2 of the Form 1040, okay? You start with the gross income at the top. It goes down, you know, some IRA deductions, stuff like that, some business deductions. Then we hit the bottom, which is adjusted gross income at the bottom of the page. That then flips over to the second page. There's some additional exemptions and stuff like that. And then they have taxable income, and then they tax you. What I think is interesting is when we listen to the media, even some of the more technical media, they talk about income and this $250,000 income. Well, what is that? Is it gross income? Is it adjusted gross income? Is it modified adjusted gross income? Is it taxable income? I think most people presume that it's taxable income, that it's after all the fees and expenses have been taken out at the very bottom, then it's taxed. Well, the fact is, no, it's adjusted gross income, and it's worse than that because you take adjusted gross income and add some additional items in various cases, and that's called modified adjusted gross income. So, I mean, this thing gets kind of crazy, but the point is, $250,000, is that really $250,000 of taxable income? No, it's modified adjusted gross income. And
so it's less.
Yeah, so taxable income might be 220, 240, 210, 190, we don't know. And then if you think about a couple, maybe you have two professional couples that work 60 hours a week both, and they're both making 100 and a quarter, or they're making 100,000, you know, modified adjusted gross income. You know, suddenly this doesn't seem so rich. Okay, and maybe it's two different business people. Maybe one owns a retail store and one's a pest control company or something like that, and they're both making 100 grand, and they work 10 years to build this up to the kind of income they're making now. Suddenly they're cast as rich, and they're the bad guys, and they have to pay these higher taxes. So the point I'm trying to make is these people aren't as rich as you think, and they may not make this income every year. They might make 50 grand one year, 300 the next, 110 the next, because they're entrepreneurs. It's not like a paycheck.
Well, and then you add on to it that most of these entrepreneurs are paying, they have to pay the employer and the employee on FICA FUTA. So, I mean, all these things combine to really recast the definition of what is rich. See, that's the thing that I think that's really a tremendous opportunity for us who are actually in planning, financial planning, dealing with tax advantage strategies, tax advantage products. And by the way, there's some strategies and so forth that aren't even insurance that we can employ. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, once you define what AGI is and what MAGI is, and MAGI, now you got me talking like this. I've been infected, you know. Where we're talking about how this is framed. So we know right away that $250,000 isn't $250,000 gross. I mean, by the time we get done with our deductions, everything else, we're a lot lower than we thought we were going to be. And some of the people that actually run businesses, which I believe is the heart and blood of the American economy, are going to pay more taxes, and I think you're way down too low. All right, but that's my political statement for today, strictly economics. Now we know this is happening, okay? There's no way around this. And you talked about in the first section about these automatic cuts. And I mean, this could be punitive. This is a take no prisoners across the board cut where, I mean, you name it, defense spending, everything gets whacked. So this isn't just a small trim job. This is like major horticulture. This is like knocking the bush down.
This is major dysfunction of our government. And that should occur, that should concern all taxpayers, citizens of the United States. I don't care whether you're liberal or conservative, when the government breaks down and can't come to some sort of an agreement, they can't govern our nation because they just are in gridlock, then we've got a problem, because then you're not making policy, it's just cut. And that's not good. We have to be looking at the various types of things and what's going on. And furthermore, this job gets tougher and tougher as the debt gets bigger and bigger, and bigger portions of our budget are the interest payments. The interest payments on this major debt just gets bigger and bigger and gobbles it away. So it gets kind of scary.
Well, I've already brought this up before, but you know, we're looking at the U.S. debt clock. It's streaming now at 16 trillion counting. By the next election, it could be 20 to 22 trillion if nothing's done. If you go out to the Truth in Accounting, but just that title, just that title of that site, truthinaccounting.org, it not only includes the 16 trillion debt and counting, but it includes all the government obligations on all plans, somewhere clocking around $76 trillion in obligations.
Well, you know, that brings up another point, Steve. I really am concerned about the games that are being played by our government in terms of being truthful to our people. What's happening, and I see it at state government and federal government, is they find ways to get it off the balance sheet, so to speak. They find ways to put it in a footnote so that it isn't clear that that's going on. And they're doing that. That's why this Truth in Accounting, the numbers are so much higher than the $16 trillion debt clock, because the 16 trillion is what they admit to. The rest of it are liabilities they're building up, and they're really not showing them on the balance sheet.
Well, I'm getting scary because I've heard people talking about that Social Security is not even an obligation of the government anymore. Unbelievable. You can watch this show and all our shows this week by hopping out to our website, www.brokersalliance.com. Just hit the red on-demand button. That's the buzz for the biz for today. Get in the zone, the business insurance zone.
The Biz is brought to you by Brokers Alliance, a national leader in insurance products, support services, and educational workshops. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.